asatoma sadagamaya tamasoham jyotirgamaya mrityurmam amritam gamaya aviravir maedhi rudra yate dakshinam mukha te namaham pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the non-dual reality. And we're going to be talking about Vedanta metaphysics, and in particularly about ontology, that is, an inquiry into the nature of being. What is being? What is reality? What is truth? Is it one or is it many? Can it be known? If it can be known, how can it be known? What is that by knowing which all this becomes known? These are age-old philosophical questions. Now, there are some philosophers who maintain that there is no ultimate reality, that there is no ultimate being, that all is becoming, that there's only change, that everything is in flux. This is called process metaphysics. In contrast with this is the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy that there is an ultimate being, that it is one only without a second, and that it is changeless. Now let's just look here a little bit of an epistemological questions, that is about what do we know? According to the teachings of Vedanta, we experience reality. That is, we experience levels of reality. And they have technical terms to describe these three levels. The first is the pratibhasika satta. That means the reality that we experience, for example, in our dreams, or that we experience when we mistake a rope for a snake. That's a kind of illusory reality. It's private. It's created by our own imagination and drawn forth from our own memory. As long as we are within the dream, it appears to be very real. But when we awaken, we understand that it was illusory. We awaken to the second level of being in our experience. It's called the Vyavaharika Satta. That means conventional reality. That's the phenomenal world, the empirical reality that we experience every day, like what we ordinarily mean by real. The real world is, this is the second level of being. And Vedanta teaches that this world itself can be graded into gross, subtle, and causal. And there are great saints and sages and yogis who, in the depths of their meditation, are able to calm their mind and to realize higher levels of reality in the phenomenal empirical world. That is, they realize that there are higher worlds, that there are, beyond this gross physical plane, there are subtle planes, and there are causal planes. All of these belong to the Vyavaharika Satta, that is, empirical reality. And it's what Vedanta calls Maya. That is, it's all this relative. Maya just means this is the relative world. Beyond this relative world, there is a higher reality. It's called the Paramartika Satta. It is the world of the absolute. It's like space. It has no parts. And it's one only without a second, and it doesn't change. This is the highest reality. We say that it's the highest reality. We have to say, as it were, because this is the realm of the absolute. And we can't speak about the absolute being relatively higher, or because that invokes the whole concept of relativity. Therefore, there is only one reality. Whatever is, is. Whatever is not, is not. And therefore, in comparison with this ultimate absolute reality, all of the world, the illusory world of our dream, and the phenomenal world of the waking state are unreal. Now let's, to understand this teaching, let's look a little bit, use some famous analogy to explain the nature of reality. We can think of in old India, they had a jewelry, so we call it a gold shop. And in the gold shop, they traded in bullion and in coins, but they specialized in jewelry. And they sold earrings and nose rings and toe rings and bracelets and bangles and necklaces and chains. And all of these ornaments, all of them were made out of gold. And so in the shop we could see many different names and forms, but they're all made of the same substance. This is the old teaching analogy of the Vedanta philosophy. From this we get two Vedantic, fundamental Vedantic lessons. First is that we can see that just as in the shop, there are many ornaments of different sizes, of different shapes, and with different structures, but there's only one substance. Similarly, as in this world of our experience, there are many names and forms, but there is only one reality. There's one in the many. There's unity in diversity. Fundamental teaching of the Vedanta philosophy. A second understanding that we can get from this analogy of the gold store is by analyzing the comparison between the shapes and the sizes and the names of those ornaments and the substance gold. The shapes and the sizes are dependent on the gold. They have no independent reality. In fact, they are nothing but gold. On the other hand, the gold is independent of the different ornaments. It does not change. And in a sense, it is more real than the names and forms of the ornaments. So too, all of those different shapes and sizes change. Whenever one particular piece of jewelry doesn't sell very well, the jeweler may melt it down, and he'll make fashion another article which is more attractive to the customers. The names and the forms change, but the substance, that is the gold, it remains the same. It's the same atomic number. It's the same atomic weight. It doesn't undergo change. Similarly, it is in this world. There is one unchanging reality. And that ultimate reality is called Brahman. And so let's look a little bit about this about the ultimate reality. Brahman, we call it Brahman. Brahman is the god of Vedanta. And it is classically described as Sat Chit Ananda, that is being, consciousness, and bliss. Those are the three descriptors, the three qualifiers, the three predicates that classically are used to describe the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth. What is the truth? The truth is that which corresponds to reality, that describes what the nature of reality is. So first, let's look at those three terms. The first is being, consciousness, and bliss. Now, the word being is contrasted with the concept of non-being. Being is the opposite of non-being. Therefore, this ultimate reality is contrasted, that is, this ultimate reality is not nothing. It's not emptiness. It's not the void. We could call it the ground of being. The ground of being. We could call it the substratum of all things. And just as we could see someone may mistake a rope for a snake, the rope is the substratum of the illusory snake. And similarly, it is Brahman, that is the non-dual reality, the ultimate reality, is the fundamental basis of our experience of the world. We could say that this ultimate reality is the substance of all things. The substance. You say, what is everything made of? If we perceive this world through our senses and study it through sense perception, then we call it matter. If we see it and consider what is the substance of our thoughts and our feelings and our interior experience, we would call it mind. If we ask what is the substance of the visions of gods and goddesses, well, that's spirit. But all three, matter, mind, and spirit, are sublated by a deeper reality, that is Brahman. That is the absolute. And just as we have ice, and we have liquid water, and then we have steam or gaseous vapor, a gross, subtle, causal. Remember, that's the nature of this world. Even in this relative world, there's gross, subtle, causal. But all three of those, that is the solid, the ice, the water, and the steam. All of them are H2O. They all have an essential. They have an essence. They all have that's the substance. That's the ultimate reality. So it's being. Being consciousness. Another word. Consciousness means that this reality, that is, we're trying to wrap our brains around it. What is it? This ultimate reality is of the nature of consciousness. That means it is not something, it's not matter. It's not like a quantum energy field. It's not like a Star Wars force. It's consciousness. And consciousness is always self-consciousness. And therefore, this ultimate reality is the pure conscious awareness that informs all of being. Being consciousness. By consciousness, we mean that it is pure consciousness. It's not limited. It's not localized. We have self-consciousness, that is, our consciousness is reflected. It's localized, reflected in the body, in the mind. We're talking this morning about pure consciousness. It cannot be limited. It's not a he or a she. It's not a father. It's not a mother or a child. It's not Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Jehovah, all the different forms of the personal God. This is an impersonal principle. Sanskrit, the word is Brahman. Brahman is a word in Sanskrit. Brahman is declined, is a neuter, in the neuter singular. And maybe it's a little unsettling to us to think about when we're speaking here about God or about the ultimate truth and reality of this world, to use a neuter term, because we think, well, that's somehow we associate it with being subhuman or being inanimate. But in the Vedanta philosophy, philosophers realized that the neuter term transcends and includes the personal. And therefore, it represents a higher reality. So being, these are the three words. Being, consciousness, bliss. But the word bliss here is ananda. Ananda means, bliss does not mean happiness. Bliss means peace. The peace that passeth all understanding. That's the nature of ultimate reality. That means the ultimate reality is not some disembodied intelligence. It's not some super intelligence. It is of the nature of peace and fulfillment. The Sanskrit word ananda, in other verses, it's called ananta. Sounds the same. Ananta means infinite. Why is this called bliss? Because its nature is that of the knowledge of being infinite. When you know there's no joy in the finite things. The only true happiness is in the infinite. And when you know yourself to be infinite, then you're filled with peace and joy. So this is the infinite. And because there cannot be two infinites, that is, they're not potentially infinite, is actual infinite. There cannot be two infinites, therefore this ultimate reality is called the One. The technical phrase in the Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter, is one only without a second. That's a technical term. One only without a second. That means when we say that this reality is one, we don't mean that it's one that excludes the many. It's not like one monotheistic God that rules all the creation. When we say that it's one, we do not mean that it includes everything. This is not that's called monism. Monism means, or pantheism, or panentheism. That is the sum total, that reality is the sum total of everything. This is not that. This is one only without a second. That means one here means non-dual. It means that there is no difference outside, or there is no internal difference of parts. It's like space. Space has no parts. This ultimate reality is the absolute. And ultimate reality must be, eventually, it must be absolute. If reality is not absolute, that is one only without a second, there can be no reality. And if reality is not ultimately, eventually absolute, then there's nothing to talk about. If reality is not absolute, then we cannot, that any statement that we make, all statements would be equally verifiable or equally unverifiable. And we couldn't speak, we couldn't communicate, and we couldn't think. Therefore, we cannot escape the conclusion that there is an absolute reality. We cannot deny the absolute truth. Now, the rishis of the Upanishads, all these teachings come from the ancient revelations of the Upanishads. The rishis were convinced that all of these definite terms, that is, being, consciousness, and bliss, were ultimately inadequate to describe the ultimate reality. That any definite term will be insufficient, because language is like a finger pointing to the moon. And we have to discriminate in philosophy between the pointing finger and the moon itself. And language is a tool that is used to describe, and in so doing, to limit something. That's how you describe it. But Brahman is infinite. Brahman cannot be limited. That is, there's only one reality. There's nothing outside of it to limit it or qualify it. And therefore, as it says in the Taittiriya Upanishad, 2nd chapter, that speech and mind, our speech and our mind go out in order to grasp it, but they return empty-handed. That is, it's beyond speech and mind. It's indescribable, this ultimate non-dual reality. It's for this reason that the rishis of ancient times resorted to what we call apophatic theology. That is, a negative approach. Rather than trying to define and describe this ultimate reality using using definite terms, that's very helpful for us, because these definite terms are they're what they are is, when we say Satchidananda, we don't mean that they are to be taken literally. What they are is they're excluder predicates. That means they're ideas. When we say that it is being, what we mean is it's not non-being. We say it's conscious, we mean that it's not non-conscious. So like this, these are excluder predicates. They're like thorns that are used. You take one thorn, and you have a thorn in your arm. You take one thorn, you remove that thorn. Use one thorn, remove the other one, and then you throw both of them away. And then you're free. That's why Yajnavalkya says in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that the best way to describe this reality is neti neti. That means whatever you think of, it's not this, and it's not this. You may say, well, what do you maybe mean it's nothing? No, it's not nothing, because who is it that say that is you cannot deny the speaker. That is the conscious being who is discriminating. That is, the self remains. And so, as to that, there's a parable. Sri Ramakrishna tells about a young husband who comes to visit in the house of his father-in-law. And he's sitting in the drawing room with several of his friends. And his wife, the girl, is in the inner apartments with her friends from Calcutta. And they don't know they don't know her husband. And they're looking through the curtain into the drawing room. And one after they're pointing at one boy and they're saying, "Is that your husband?" And the girl smiles and she says, "No." They point to a second boy. "Was he your husband?" She smiles and says, "No." Points to a third, smiles and says, "No." Finally, when they point to the boy who is her husband, she smiles and says nothing. And then they know that is her husband. Similarly, it is with the ultimate reality. That is, we have to discriminate and remove the false superimpositions, all the false beliefs that we have about reality. And about reality includes ourself. We're speaking here about this morning, we're talking about the Brahma Vidya. That is about in terms of external reality, rather than the Atma Vidya, but this is all the same reality. And just as we have to, how can we know this reality? All we have to do is we have to negate what is not reality. We negate all the false beliefs and then remains silent, and the truth reveals itself. So this is now at this point you may ask, or maybe you're thinking, well, this all sounds very philosophical and metaphysical and far out and otherworldly. And what does it have to do with me? And how do I benefit? And what does all this talk have to do with me and my practical life? We could ask that. The answer is that the ultimate reality, the non-dual reality, is the first principle of philosophy. This is the first principle of the Vedanta philosophy. If you are seriously interested, that is, everybody in the world has a philosophy. But if you're seriously interested in personal growth and spiritual growth, you have to have that is, the unexamined life is not worth living. You have to bring that philosophy up into your consciousness, examine it, and reconstruct it in accord with reality. The mansion of philosophy is built on a foundation, and the foundation is sunk in the ground. And therefore, the first thing that we have to understand is, what is the ground? This is what we're talking about this morning. The ground of being. Once we understand the basic principle, then everything else follows as a natural, in a matter of course. That is, once we accept in our mind and heart, we come to have the conviction that there is such a reality, then the question will naturally arise, how do we know that's true? That's called epistemology. And the question will arise, how can I live my life? What can I do in order to realize it? That's called morality, ethics. This principle is the base, is the grounding for all of ethics. This principle is the justification for all judgments that we make about what is good, true, and beautiful. We can make those judgments, but without this ground of being, we have no justification. And therefore, out of this emerges a framework. Out of metaphysics and epistemology and ethics, and there emerges a belief system. There emerges a worldview, a philosophy of life. That's what we call Vedanta non-dualism. This is our philosophy. And so why should we be interested in this? Well, because it gives us a grounding for our philosophy of life. In addition to that, it defines for us what is our purpose? What is the purpose of our life? The fundamental teaching of this Vedanta philosophy is that you are this ultimate reality. You are Brahman. This is your nature. This is your destiny, to realize that you are infinite, that you are not a separate being, that you are one only without a second, that there's only pure, infinite, pure consciousness, which is your very self. That's the purpose of life. We call it enlightenment. The purpose of our life is to achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment means to know what reality is, to know who we really are, to become who we really are. That's our purpose. And this is called realization. This is called self-realization, God-realization. And it is the source of all the wisdom of the East. And it's the ideal of this Vedanta philosophy. And it is the goal of our spiritual life. So that's it.
That's it.
Make it short and sweet.
That's it.
And
Thank you.
should we have a few questions, Swami? Huh?
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
The question?
Okay, we'll have a few questions and answers. If you have. Do we have a microphone or do we have a? Yeah. No, that's okay. Yes, sir.
What do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do when the doubt comes back?
What?
The doubt that even though I understand that we are the self, yet the doubt kept coming back. How do we?
The thought, you mean? The thought keeps coming back?
Thoughts of doubt.
Doubt. Oh, doubt. Well, doubt in most of our doubts, that's what the saints and sages say, that all of the doubt, the doubts that we feel are just the voice of our own lower mind, that it's a voice of our own separate self. That really, when we study, that's the beauty of the Vedanta philosophy, that that all of the teachings of this philosophy stand to reason. There's no reasonable doubt. The only doubt here is irrational. It's unreasonable. And so how do we deal with doubt? It's not a, that is, there are certain basic beliefs in life. It's like God. People say, how can we doubt the existence of God? Nobody can doubt the existence of God. Everybody believes in God, if by God we mean the ultimate concern, right? Even if money is your God, that's your ultimate reality, that's what we believe in that. We don't doubt that it exists. There's a certain basic beliefs that human beings have. We really can't reasonably doubt. And therefore we have to just examine ourselves as being irrational.
Thank you.
How do you like that? I don't know. That's what we're told. That's what the teaching, yeah. Okay, good?
One more question?
No.
I guess.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, you said becoming, like the realization or enlightenment is becoming who you're meant to be? Are you talking about in the absolute, or are you talking about in like the reality that we're living in this lifetime?
Yeah, what I mean was that our purpose is to become who we really are. Not who we were meant to be, but who you already are. That's the fundamental law of life. That's the fundamental law of everything in the universe. It's struggling consciously or unconsciously to be what it really is. Everything in the world, trees and animals have no problem. They are what they are. And they have no confusion or about what is their purpose. It's only as human beings that we struggle with a kind of an ongoing identity crisis, trying to figure out who we really are. So that's our purpose, to realize who we really are. And that's the first question of the Vedanta philosophy, answers that question. First question of philosophy, who am I? And it's only the Vedanta philosophy that answers this question directly in the very beginning, that you are a divine immortal soul, that you are Brahman, that you are an infinite being. That's the answer to the first question of philosophy. Yeah. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is, in self-realization and an understanding of our Dharma and what our Dharma is, how do we know if we are truly fit for liberation?
If you're fit for liberation.
True moksha.
Yeah. Well, Vedanta teaching is very, very clear on that point. That is to say that there are four qualifications that you need to have: viveka, vairagya, discrimination, renunciation, certain moral and spiritual virtues, and a longing for liberation. These are the classic four virtues or four prerequisites for being a fit a student. That is, a student who is ready, a qualified student. It's called an adhikaravada. That means these are the four qualifications that are necessary. If you have these qualifications, none of us have those perfect qualifications, but we become aware that our goal is to acquire those qualifications. And when we do have that, we have some discrimination, we have some dispassion, we have some good virtues, and we have some longing for liberation. So yes, we are qualified for inquiring into this higher truth. Yeah. Question?
If we're in the state of becoming who we already are, and we have achieved enlightenment, one might ask, what was the cause? What was the cause of the duality and the fall from grace?
Well, the idea is with becoming, this is what I said in the very beginning, that some philosophers maintain that this is all becoming, that we are in a state of becoming.
Right.
But Vedanta says is that this is the Jagat, this is the world of change, as it were. That means, but not really. In your true nature, you're already a divine immortal soul. You don't have to become that. That's fundamental teaching of Vedanta. So the idea is that that's one of the false beliefs that we have, that we have to we have to become something. We have to change ourselves. And so philosophically, you're already that reality. So you can see how many different levels this teaching is addressing. It's addressing our predicament on many different levels. We find ourselves here in the relative world of becoming. How can we say that we're not becoming? It seems to be, it's counterintuitive. And yet, this is the ideal. What we're talking about here is what is the ultimate truth, not what is our experience. Our experience of the truth is in the pratibhasika and the vyavaharika reality. That's where we're at. That's our condition. That's the human condition. But the truth of the matter, as philosophers, as students of Vedanta philosophy, then we want to get clear in our mind of what is the highest ideal. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Yeah, all right, Swami. Om Dyo Hoshantihi Antariksha Ham Shantihi Prithivi Shanti Apa Shanti O Shadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.